Joining me now, the only guy from CAIR who will ever join me, is Ahmed Rehab, Executive Director of CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations in Chicago. Ahmed, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Okay, so you've written a piece today warning against this kind of thinking and pointing out correctly, and I would not quibble with you about this, that very often these ISIS related terrorists are killing way more Muslims than they are anybody else. However, the question I want to put to you, and I will stipulate up front that we don't have a radicalized Islamic community in this country, generally speaking. But we're 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 bringing in from countries like Saudi Arabia and like Iraq and like Pakistan and like Egypt and like Somalia. We're bringing in about 130,000 people a year who are legal permanent residents, LPRs. They get a green card, and that amounts to more than 10,000 a month. And I just don't actually believe that this country can vet that number every month, and that slowing that immigration number down is not a bad idea. What is wrong with that?
First, let me commend you because you started off with much better givens than you have in previous interviews, conceding the fact that we don't have a radical Muslim problem generally in America and that our fight is not with Islam or Muslims. So let's start from there. The question is a valid question, and the answer to it is I believe we can, and we always have vetted people coming into this country. The problem is not with the countries or the people coming from certain countries, but rather with ISIS and Al Qaeda and those very specific institutions and groups. They've been institutionalized in the world. If you were to just look at the country of origin, then I will draw your attention to the fact that some members of ISIS come from other countries, including European countries. So are we going to shut down immigration from those countries as well? If you take the approach of this
Well,
wide dragnet.
on that point, would you agree that maybe this visa waiver program from countries like Belgium should be stopped?
No, absolutely not. Because again, these wide dragnet type of solutions have proven to never be effective. NYPD surveyed the general Muslim community of New York for many, many years, which amounted to a grand total of zero successful counterterrorism incidents. The fact is, hard intelligence is what works. You cannot, for example, using the same logic, say that we will not allow any people from white European countries in the United States in order to stop white racism and white supremacy, which is on the rise in America once again. That would be a silly argument. We understand that. But when it comes to terrorism and then the larger picture of Muslims, we fail to understand the fallacy of that logic.
Well, but here's the thing. Let's start with the concept. We don't want to be Belgium. We don't want to have a Molenbeek community in our midst where people who are planning and actually carrying out attacks like the Paris attack are sheltered and hidden by the community. This guy that carried out the Paris attack has lived for 4 months in the Molenbeek community, and then not only that, when he was captured and admitted that there was a plan afoot for another attack, the community continued to shelter the people who were the bombers. I'm recognizing that we don't have that problem now. I'm saying why introduce that problem to this country by having an immigration rate from these places that we can't be assured that we're vetting properly.
The answer is in your own question. If we all agree that we don't have this problem in our country, and then we recognize the fact that in the past we did not have a system where we limited immigration based on country of origin, and still we had no problem, as you've just conceded, in our country, that makes the argument that we don't need to change what we're doing
Well,
because it has
ISIS
been
is
successful.
the new element. That's what
ISIS is
puts.
not new. ISIS has been around for 5 years, and we still
Well,
don't have that problem in our country. We have had zero problems of any Muslim community harboring or hiding radicals. If there's any indication of radical behavior, Muslims and Muslim leaders, including imams, etc., are the first to raise a red flag. We've seen this time and time again.
They didn't in San Bernardino.
Because it was under the radar. It's the same
Saeed
way that
Farouk was going to that mosque.
And Dylann Roof was going to a church. I mean, it's criminals can't operate under the radar. If they can operate under the radar of the all-seeing law enforcement, they can certainly fool.
Wait a minute, are we
are
we lumping in crazy people who should be in a straitjacket with people who have a political agenda for terrorism?
Well, the way you define it is, if it's a white person, it's a crazy person. If it's a Muslim person, they have a political agenda. To me, they both have political agenda. Dylann Roof was very much in a sane state of mind. He was just in an evil, sane state of mind. He wanted to start a race war in America. He knew what he was doing, as did Timothy McVeigh, as did other white supremacists.
Who was he plotting with? Who was he plotting with?
With other white supremacists, and you can have lone wolves. Who was the guy in San Bernardino plotting with? We haven't seen any evidence yet that he was actually. As a matter of fact, the FBI has told us. The FBI themselves have told us that he was not operating.
So you're making Saeed Farouk and Dylann Roof the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, evil is evil, death is death, destruction is destruction. We can politicize it all day long, and that's what, unfortunately, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump are doing. It doesn't make us any safer. It scores cheap political points, maybe gains them a few votes, but it doesn't make us safer.
Well, what do you think of the fact that you call it cheap political points, but actually Donald Trump is on his way to winning the nomination?
I mean, that doesn't prove anything about the veracity of his arguments.
It proves a lot of people are afraid.
Yes, it does. That's exactly all it proves. And so what he's doing is stoking the fear, because he knows that fear will mobilize people. That to me is problematic.
I think Brussels
it's morally
stoked the fear.
Bankrupt, because that's not what a leader does. A leader alleviates fear through information, through knowledge, through common sense, through being able to say that America is capable of protecting itself with its very competent law enforcement, with its strategy of hard intelligence. That's why we employ intelligent people in our law enforcement agencies. Communities are working with law enforcement because they want to be safe. They don't want to be taken out with a terrorist attack either. Muslims, as you've mentioned at the onset of this interview, are the largest number of victims of terrorism anywhere in the world. It's been plaguing Muslims. They've been victimized by it much longer than the West has. In Egypt and in Turkey.
No,
I
know,
places.
but while Muslims have been victims of ISIS over sectarian conflict, at the same time, ISIS views non-Muslims as just as juicy a target.
As a matter of fact, that's not true, because ISIS is not. You can't label ISIS sectarian. It's a terrorist organization. It's killed more Sunni Muslims than it has Shia Muslims, and it's supposedly a Sunni organization. So that immediately refutes the notion that it's just about sectarian warfare. It is a terrorist organization. It has its own particular, very narrow brand of ideology. Anybody outside of that realm is considered fair game to be killed or maimed or attacked. And they attack Sunnis a lot more than Shia, and both Sunni and Shia a lot more than Christians and Jews, mind you. And as a matter of fact, we've heard many stories of Sunnis pretending to be Christian when arrested by ISIS, because if you're a Christian, chances are you may just be pushed to pay a certain tax. But if you're an actual Muslim, then they may say that you are an apostate because you don't have a beard, or you don't look a certain way, or say a certain thing, or pray a certain way, and you may be killed. And so, to the contrary, Sunnis are much more of a victim to ISIS than anybody else. It has nothing to do with Sunnis, and nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with a very, very narrow, particular political ideology that is cloaked in religion.
Ahmed, on that note, we're going to have to end it. But thank you very much, Ahmed Rehab of CAIR in Chicago.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Ahmed.